Hi, and a very warm welcome to my workshop here in Sheffield, England. Remaining with my theme for the present, with one more radio from overseas, I invite you to pour yourself a hot drink, grab yourself something tasty to munch, get comfortable in your favourite chair, and marvel at the radio I'll have on my bench. And here it is, the STC radio, model 5101, manufactured in Australia. I don't know when this model was released onto the Australian market, but I guess it might have been sometime during the latter half of the 1950s or into the early 1960s. Its cabinet has some discolouring, but nonetheless very stout and steadily constructed. All four of its knobs are present, that is always a bonus. Its speaker cloth is in good condition, that too is a bonus. And its dial, being consistent with the many Australian radio stations, is very busy. I very much like the look of this radio. It will take pride and place in my collection. I'll turn this gem around, remove its rear cover, and we'll take a look inside. Viewing from its rear, it is very dusty. There is what looks to be an 8-inch by 5.5-inch speaker. I guess it will contribute to a very pleasing quality of audio output. At first glance I thought the audio output valve might be a 6BW6. That was a valve STC, whose brand name was Coaster Brand here in England, incorporated into a few of their radios. Instead, the audio valve is a 6CH6, which, if my memory serves me correctly, is an EL821 or something like that. If that valve is defective, I know for a fact I do not have a spare anywhere inside this shop, but I can convert the audio output to operate with an EL84 if I have to. I'll remove this chassis from its cabinet, remove all 5 valves, then I'll prevail upon my darling wife to apply our vacuum cleaner over this chassis. Yes, it's very dusty, but not as dusty as some that I've worked on. As always, my wife accomplishes a good dusting job on radio chassis. The reason I keep away from dust that accumulates on radio chassis is, when it is disturbed, it can easily trigger an asthma attack, and they can be extremely unpleasant. As can be seen, this radio has a 5-valve complement, including an EZ80 or a 6V4 full-wave rectifier. I'll flip this chassis over and we'll take a look at its underside. Very neat and very tidy. Excuse me. I have a feeling this radio has never had any service work. It looks to be original. Purely for reliability purposes, all the wax-coated paper and foil Ducon capacitors will be replaced. Back in the day, Ducon capacitors were fairly reliable. I remember them being as reliable as our TCC capacitors. In a number of respects, this radio construction and general layout is similar to the 1957 Bell Colt, the wee radio from New Zealand I restored late last summer. That radio was a pleasure to work on. I feel sure this radio is also going to be a pleasure to work on. I'll flip this chassis so it is the right way up, and I'll connect my shop speaker to it and apply 240 volts mains power and switch on. Together we'll assess the strength of its functionality. We'll just wait for the valves to warm up. One of the dial lights has blown by the look of things. Oops. Speaker wires have come out. Oh. There might be a dirty valve base. Just gets the one station at the present. Yeah, just the one station. Oh well. At least it is functional in some shape or form. Like a good number of American and Canadian AM radios, this radio is medium wave only for Oceania, that is ITU, International Telecommunications Union, Zone 3. Right, I'll make a start on working on the chassis. In my usual modus operandi, I will begin work at the power supply. Note the mains transformer centre tap is not strapped down to deck. R10 is a 300 ohm wire wound resistor, therefore C18, 16 microfarad reservoir electrolytic capacitor, negative as, according to this circuit diagram, minus 12.5 volts. If we follow the line up via R9, 220k, R8 to 100k and R7 1 meg potential divider arrangement, there is a negative voltage potential on the AGC anode diode. I'll return to that later. Following the HT rail from the EZ81 or 6V4 cathode pin 3, it feeds direct onto the audio output transformer. It also passes through R17, 2K resistor, and is smoothed by C24, 24 microfarad electrolytic capacitor. Then it goes on to form the second HT rail for the rest of the radio. Having tastelessly frog marched you through this radio's power supply circuitry, I went ahead and replaced both the reservoir and smoothing electrolytic capacitors. If you recall, there was a slight ripple noise when I last put power to this radio. The two electrolytic capacitors, the reservoir being 16 microfarad and the smoothing being 24 microfarad, have been replaced with 22 microfarad and a 33 microfarad at 400 volts VDC respectively. Before powering this radio up again, I'll return to the circuit diagram and briefly talk about this 6CH6 audio output circuit. Will it be equally as tasteless as my talk about the power supply? I expect so. 6CH6 audio output pentode. What can I say here? There's not a lot going on circuit wise. cathode and grid 3 are respectively strapped directly down to deck. Therefore, this valve is grid 1 biased via R16 47k resistor. The anode volts, being some 260 volts, is fed from pin 3, cathode of the EZ80, and through the audio output transformer primary. C25 10 nanofarad is the tone correction or top cut capacitor. C23 accompanied with P2 250k Lin potentiometer form the tone shaping arrangement. This is a summary of this audio output circuit. I'll now go on to replace paper and foil wax coated capacitors C25 and C23 and check the value of R16 47k resistor. I started this practical by checking the value of grid 1 bias resistor 47k. It gave a value reading of 52.1k. Therefore, 10% of 47k is 4.7k. Add the 47k to the 4.7k. The result is 51.7k. So that grid 1 bias resistor is pretty close to the plus limit of its silver band 10% tolerance. So I'll let it remain in situ for the time being. I've replaced the 10 nanofarad fixed top cut capacitor along with replacing the tone capacitor, also a 10 nanofarad, in the variable tone circuit. I also replaced a 100 nanofarad decoupling capacitor just there. I'll show you that on the circuit diagram when I get it up next on the computer. As I said a while ago, there's not a great deal to this section of the audio circuit. It's now over to the 6AV6 or DH77, EBC90, 6AT6, which one you prefer? They are a double diode triode. Before getting started here on the 6AV6 circuitry, the 100 nanofarad decoupling capacitor I replaced is located here. Like the circuit pertaining to the 6CH6, there is not a great deal to the 6AT6 or 6AV6 circuit. R13, 33 ohm is the cathode resistor. There is a negative feedback loop or line from the loudspeaker or audio output transformer secondary via a 1.5k resistor in parallel with a 10 nanofarad capacitor. Control grid connects to the slider of the 1 meg log volume control via a capacitor C19 22 nanofarad and R14. It's there, 10 meg is the grid elite resistor. From the HT rail, R15 270k resistor, just there, connects onto the anode, and from there audio is fed to grid 1 of the 6CH6 via blocking capacitor C20, 10 nanofarad capacitor. As I said, not a great deal to this section of the audio circuit. Now over to the practical, where I will perform off camera the usual checking resistor values and replacing wax coated paper and foil capacitors. See you all shortly. And here we have it, chaps. Audio output circuit refurbishment now complete. I checked the values of 4 resistors and replaced 3 wax coated paper and foil capacitors. Out of the 4 resistors I checked, 1 was well out of its tolerance silver 10% banding. The 270k anode load resistor, just there, it gave a value reading of 360k. 10% of 270k is 27k. Add 27k to 270k, that totals 297k. At plus 20% maximum tolerance, the value would be 324k. At a rough and ready calculation, the 270k resistor, given a value reading of 360k, is around 23% over the plus maximum 10% tolerance. So it had to go. I replaced it with an old new stock carbon film type. It's now over to what is commonly known as the front end. I'll get the circuit diagram up on my iPad so we can take a look at what is going on. Here, in this part of this radio's reconditioning, I will briefly link 6 circuits into one, namely the bandpass, frequency changer, local oscillator, IF amplifier, demodulation, and AGC line, since each one is generally regarded as forming the front end of a radio. Starting with the ferrite rod aerial, which consists of a tuning coil wound onto a ferrite core, functions as a miniature loop which has a single pickup similar to the large wooden frame or loop aerials. As Don, Restore Old Radios, has demonstrated, check out his YouTube channel if you are not familiar. When the coil is aligned with an electromagnetic wave, or in other words, so that maximum flux is enclosed by the coil, the ferrite rod acts as an induced magnet and distorts the magnetic field of the waves so as to concentrate the lines of force into the rod and through the coil. Consequently, the flux linkage is obtained, and thus the induced EMFs are equal to those occurring with a much larger loop aerial arrangement. Don, Restored Old Radios, has demonstrated the improvement of the Q of such circuits, in the sense there is a very considerable voltage magnification occurring. Now, the bandpass, or that has been drawn on this circuit diagram, is inductively coupled by a step-up transformer arrangement. C5, where is it? Yes, C5 is the tuning capacitor, and C6 is its padder. The incoming signal is fed into grid 1 of the eptode section of the 12AH8 and mixed with the local oscillator frequency in the triode section of this valve. It is affected by combining the signal frequency voltage in the common electron stream in such a manner the resulting anode current passes through the primary of the first IF transformer, dependent upon the sum and difference of the two frequencies, or selecting the oscillator frequency to be above the signal frequency, which for this radio the IF frequency is 455 kHz. Though not having a great deal of strength at that point, the carrier has been converted to the IF frequency and is fed into the 6BH5 IF amplifying valve via the first IF transformer. Once the signal has been amplified and put through the second IF transformer, the audio component has to be separated from the carrier wave via the demodulation stage. This is done via the diode, of which the anode is pin 6 of the DH77 or 686 as it's drawn on this circuit diagram. The second diode, pin 5, is for the AGC line, which its prime purpose is to control or compensate for fluctuations in signal strength. Right, I'll press on with doing the practical work of checking and replacing components in the front end circuits, back when that is done. On camera, in less than a click of the fingers, it is all complete. In reality, the entire operation of checking most of the resistors and replacing wax-coated foil and paper capacitors in what is generally termed as the front end took a total of 1 hour and 5 minutes. When I say I checked most of the resistors I checked in this area gave value readings within their 10% silver band tolerance, though I will add all of them were within 1% less than their plus outer limit 10% tolerance rating. So rather than muck about disturbing all those resistors, I thought it was best to let sleeping dogs lie, or sleeping resistors lie. The other resistors over to the right were checked, since most shared the same solder terminals with wax capacitors. It made sense in that instance to check their value. They too gave value readings that were within their plus outer limit tolerance ratings, and whilst I had the soldering iron on the go, I replaced the old grey insulated mains lead with its non-sheathed pronged plugs with a double insulated mains lead attached to a moulded mains plug with sheathed live and neutral prongs, and a 3 amp internal fuse inserted. I used to salvage these off old scrap televisions. Very useful. I have put mains power to this chassis and it is now working fine. I'll power it up again so you too can listen to this radio's performance. Right, here we go.
Ridiculous. It'd be interesting to know what the player manager says. He just gives a rousing applause to his backline.
When I get it to them, I'm sure they will feel that in a day.
Thank you very much.
back the other way.
Welcome into a save before, won't get his way on this occasion, and Doncaster through Bostock just want to put a couple of passes together. Coppinger.
Football fans believe that even those fans cared about the traditions of the game. We have to look at the competitions, the Premier League.
Certainly gets a few more stations than last time you heard it. Right. I'm very pleased thus so far with the performance of this radio. Here, these are the 9 wax coated paper and foil capacitors, one 270k carbon composite resistor and 2 electrolytic capacitors that came out of this radio. As seen, they were replaced with new components. I toyed with the idea of executing an IF and oscillator alignment to this radio. Each one of the iron dust slugs inside the first and second IF transformers are seized solid. I cannot rotate them. When I try to do so, it has a torsion bar effect upon this plastic knitting needle I fashioned by filing a straight screwdriver blade on one end. Personally, I would not advise applying light oils or lubricants of any kind or solvents to iron dust slugs. Often, it tends to soften the composition of the slug, and it erodes when rotating it with the softest or kindest of adjustment tools for that job. Slugs can be eased off with gentle heat. One day I'll demonstrate how that might be done. In the meantime, since this radio is fairly sensitive, it picks up plenty of stations. I'll leave them where they be for the present. There are a number of more important jobs that require attention, such as its cabinet and general cleaning. Right, it's now over to the cabinet repair. As I have said in previous videos, I'm certainly no woodworker or cabinet restoration hand. This trim or bezel around the front of the radio has sustained a few dings and dents. One there, another one there, another one there. Doubtful I'll get them looking perfect, but I shall do my best to get them as close as I can to looking really good. Also on the corners, veneer and bits of wood have chipped out of the, and also along here. I'll see what I can do with that. Using a sharp utility knife blade, I scraped this radio's paint off the front wooden outer trim and varnish off the cabinet. There were a number of damaged areas that required plastic wood filler, and there were loads more where wood filler fell out of small nooks and crannies. I guess I must have disturbed those when I was scraping the old varnish from this cabinet. It all turned out to be a long-winded, tedious job. Applying a variety of grades of abrasive papers and fabrics, I smoothed the bare surface areas, and then I applied an even coat of pitch pine wood stain to the top sides and feet. I feel reasonably sure this is ready for its first coat of clear varnish. It is 24 hours since I applied a coat of wood stain, so it has had ample time to dry. Before I go on to do all of that, my darling wife, bless her, asked if there was anything she could do in the way of assistance. I said yes. You can replace all the capacitors valued over 1 nanofarad, test each valve via the valve tester, test the value of each carbon composite resistor and replace where necessary, and replace the existing single insulated mains lead with a double insulated type. Having said all of that, I immediately began detecting a few negative vibes. Consequently, I started getting the notion that was not what she had in mind. Feeling somewhat at a loss at that moment, I asked her what she would like to do in the way of assistance. Now, as it happened, wifey wanted to clean a few items. How could I have not seen that? As clearly can be seen, wifey made a good job at cleaning and polishing the outer plastic dial ring. The front finger plate has cleaned up reasonably well. She made a nice job cleaning, spray painting, polishing and lacquering the STC badge. And she did a super job cleaning, spray painting and lacquering the tuning dial bezel. It was very dirty and quite pitted since it is cast from white metal. So, well done to wifey. Right, I'll crack on with applying the first coat of varnish. Back with you once that has been done. Its first coat of clear varnish has been applied. Nothing of any great significance. A few more coats will be applied before I paint the front trim. I'll allow this cabinet to stand overnight before I apply a second coat of varnish. Having applied 4 generous coats of clear varnish to the top, sides and underside of this cabinet, I consider that particular phase as being complete. I'll not say nor imply I've executed a brilliant job. Shall we say I've accomplished some sort of presentable job thus so far? If so, I'll be satisfied with that. Phase 2 of tidying up this cabinet involves painting this trim surround with white satin paint. Who knows how it might turn out? Back once that is complete. First coat of white satin paint applied to the wooden trim. I suppose it might be considered as being passable. Back with you after I've applied its second coat of white satin paint. Here, the wooden trim around the front of this radio has received its third and final coat of white satin paint. Once the paint has dried and the masking tape removed, reassembly work will begin. As can be seen, this cabinet is starting to take shape. As it progresses, I'm forming a broad idea, or vision in my mind's eye, how elegant this modular radio would have looked throughout the 1960s and into the 1970s. I will add, its cabinet is very well constructed. In some respects, it is equally as strong, durable, and very pleasing to the eye as the Bell Colt radio, manufactured in New Zealand from around 1957, I reconned a while ago. Both are superb vintage radios. I'll now fit the chassis into this cabinet, then I'll get back to you with this set switched on and working. I know that I said I'd get back to you with this radio fully assembled and working, but before I do that, I'll point out one small detail which I quite like. and that is these two identification tags. One that reads aerial, and the other that reads earth. What I often do in instances where flying leads are present from the rear of radio receivers is to cut them down, drill appropriate sized holes into the rear of the radio chassis, and fit these types of socket. Pretty much like I fitted to the rear of the New Zealand manufactured Bell radio. In this instance I've refrained from doing that. I'm somewhat surprised these two tags are still attached to their respective leads. I guess most of them fell off and went missing long ago. And here we have it, chaps. One STC medium wave radio model 5101, designed and manufactured in Australia from around 1960, reconditioned, powered up and working. There's nothing much at that end of the dial.
That gives the same 30 minutes or 1 hour visit to...
Next up for you, we've got Never Let It Go by Relica.
Plenty of volume there.
He's fullback in centre half. It's never going to go behind.
It's now picking up a few more stations than it once did. As I've stressed in the past on several occasions, and doubtless it will be blatantly obvious to you, I'm totally and absolutely useless at restoring and tidying up radio cabinets. Here I ask that you not be too hard on me. I've managed to do what I'm capable. At least it looks clean. I'm sure you will agree, this STC radio has been fairly straightforward to recondition. It will take pride and place in my vintage radio collection. I thank you for viewing. Your time and interest is always appreciated. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. More videos in the near future. Until then, it's TTFN from Phil.